question is, how can we expand access to power and increase the number of women in decision-making roles? And I think this is like a really heavy question, but I love the question, so thank you for giving me that. So what I did, I kind of divided this up into 3 chunks. And the first one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the global and Africa context, because getting access to power is all about understanding the context. We have to understand where we are, where we're sitting, what's influencing us, where does the power lie, and that means understanding context. I'm then going to talk a little bit about leadership, about global leadership, national leadership, like was mentioned, and also about our individual leadership. And then I'll close very quickly on women in leadership, and again, looking at that in an individual way. But it'd be nice as I run through this very quickly, the question says, how do we increase the number of women in these leadership roles? And I would say it's not just about the numbers. It's not just about getting numbers of women in leadership roles. It's about retaining us once we're there. And that's really super important. Right, so I'm going to sprint through. So, global context, as we know, extremely complex, shifting social, political and economic landscape, unpredictability, fragility, reversals in progress, really, really important. And because of this really dynamic global landscape, I think that it now demands a new model of leadership. And I believe we are that new model, and we all have a role to play. We in this room, we are the new model. We are women, okay? We need to get into leadership, and we will influence leadership and the definition of what leadership is. So we have all these multiple challenges. We know, we've heard this morning, we read them every day. COVID, climate, conflict, inequality increasing, technological change, we've got to keep an eye on that. It's going to be massive, it already is. Migration, Russia's war on Ukraine has brought dramatic changes in Europe's security landscape, plus huge global consequences. And these are complex, they're rapidly evolving, and they demand collective action and clear leadership. And if we look at COVID, it just swept through the world. Everything changed, countries, societies, communities reshaped, political and social landscapes restructured, and new social norms were created, all at breakneck speed. The pandemic became a great revealer, as we heard this morning, amplifying existing inequalities and unfairness across the world. We had this amazing, impressive leadership on scientific discoveries with the vaccine, but global political leadership has been woefully lacking in COVID, but also in other global challenges such as climate. And I would argue that our rules-based international order became fragile, even disordered. We have seen the rise of populism, protectionism, nationalism, exacerbated by COVID. And political dynamics are driving this short-termism, yet our multiple threats demand a long-term thinking and greater cooperation, and that's what our leadership means. Citizens' trust in governments across the world has been eroded, creating fragility in once stable economies. Take the USA. January the 6th, who would have thought last year what happened there? And now we have the alarming prospect of an overturn of Roe versus Wade, and that affects every one of us in this room. So if you look at Africa, it's a very similar situation: lack of vaccines, COVID, increase in poverty, huge challenges around debt, and even talk about driving an extra 30 billion people into extreme poverty. But there are opportunities in Africa. And I think what we see across Africa is a discussion on the Great Reset, a transformation that calls for astute leadership, management of complexity, fragility, urgency on multiple fronts. How can this be done in Africa? Enter Africa's managers, transformers, frontline workers, and caregivers, African women. And they are often hidden. They are the leaders, they are the change makers, they are the managers, and they are changing Africa at many levels. Leadership is at multiple levels. And we also see great collaboration across African leaders vis-à-vis COVID and vis-à-vis climate. So on my last bit, I'm now just going to talk about women in leadership, and it's to connect that global context that we're sitting in, our national context as well. These dynamics that we all have to deal with, we have to know what's going on around ourselves and globally as well at the same time. So we all know that women make up fewer than 10% of national leaders worldwide. Less than 7% of Fortune 500 companies or CEOs are led by women. Only 1 in 4 parliamentarians in the world is a woman, and we all earn less than our men. And I just want to, you may know some of these women. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala heads up the WTO. Christine Lagarde heads up the European Central Bank. Amina Mohammed is a deputy of the UN. Winnie at AIDS. Kristalina, IMF. These are fantastic role models, but their road to leadership has been very bumpy. It is not straight, lots hidden. We don't share our stories. Why would we share our stories? We don't share our bumpy stories. I know all these women. Their road to where they are now has not been easy. And these are the women who have survived. And what Ngozi and Julia Gillard said in a great book, Women in Leadership, Real Lives, Real Lessons, I suggest you read it. She said, behind the statistics, they both said, behind those statistics are eye-popping statistics, they say, lies a pattern of unequal access to power. And Julia says very clearly she was blindsided by the sexism she had to face when she was in power. I just want to make one quote here of Ngozi, because I think this is very important, then I'll end on a few recommendations. And she says, women have to stay balanced on a tightrope between strength and empathy. If they come across as too tough, they're viewed as hard and unlikable. But if they come across as too soft, they seem to be lacking the backbone they need to lead. And we're constantly navigating those two spaces. And I tell you, if you come across as too soft, you are easily attacked. So we know the unconscious bias often shapes the way female leaders are perceived by the media, by men, by other women. We are hyper-scrutinized in all walks of life, but where we are taking the space of men, we are even more hyper-scrutinized. And I think all leaders are unfairly criticized. It's sometimes fairly criticized, but it's not an easy job. But women leaders who want to bring change are even more criticized. And I know of, and I've counseled many women in senior leadership positions who are increasingly subject to unfair criticism. And what this does, what's the effect? It reinforces gender inequalities in leadership, undermining career progression and perpetuating double standards that we face every day in our lives and in the workforce. And we need a greater awareness of this, thank you. We need a greater awareness of these challenges for women leaders, and appropriate action and support are urgently needed, as I will just quickly outline now. I think the other really key thing in a crisis is the concept called the glass cliff. This is when women are brought in to lead organizations in fragile situations. They're very challenging. Women often are able to change these organizations around. So we're brought into precarious organizations, and we are often able to change them around, and then we're moved on. Why is that? Why is that? So what do we do about this? That sounds all very negative, doesn't it? I used to think things were very, progressed in a positive way. Everything got better, but it doesn't, as we see globally. And that's why there is more need for us to pull together. So, like I said, it's not just about getting women in leadership. It's about supporting women who are already there. And it's about retaining them. We need to support each other. We need to protect each other. We need to protect ourselves. We need to look at our HR. Does your HR, is it fit for purpose? What about your governance systems? Do your HR and governance systems talk to each other? We need to encourage men. Thank you, some men in this room. We need to encourage you to point out sexism in the workplace, because they are more likely to be taken seriously on the issue than their female colleagues. Thank you guys for being here. It's so valuable, so valuable. We need to encourage family building in the workplace. It's okay to have a family. I was at the World Bank. I had 3 babies. I hid 2 of them. One's fine, but 3's too many. So I never talked about my other 2 babies. There's a whole dialogue on that one. So we need to really create networks, and they're natural for men. They network like mad, and it's all about them. For us, we network like mad, and it's all about the issues. But let me circle back to the beginning and finish here. We've got these, increasingly complex problems that we're all dealing with. We need this new model of leadership. We are that leadership. We need more women leaders everywhere who are people-focused, with a commitment to kindness, to dignity, listening and respect, who are supported and networked. And I believe these women leaders will build a different type of organisation or a different type of nation, changing leadership globally. And that, in turn, will contribute towards more resilient, more cohesive and sustainable societies. Thank you.